The ambient light of the synodic nexus pulsed with a rhythmic, deep violet, a color calibrated over millennia to suppress volatility and promote the cold logic of statecraft. High synodic speaker Krellis, his segmented eyes adjusting constantly to the holographic projections mapping the frontier, felt the familiar pressure of the chamber, a weight equivalent to the stability of the entire hegemony, a civilization spanning hundreds of stellar nurseries and maintained by relentless, calculated equilibrium. The air was thick not merely with elevated carbon dioxide, but with the unspoken fear that had begun to seep like effluent into the highest echelons of Vithar governance, a fear catalyzed entirely by the unexpected emergence of the human species. Below Krellis, arrayed in the tiered hemisphere of the Nexus floor, the subsynodics shifted restlessly in their nutrient harnesses, their chitinous plates whispering against the polished obsidian of their seats, each movement amplifying the underlying tension. The projection dominating the central void depicted the sector designated Sol 3, a small, unremarkable yellow sun around which orbited a water-heavy, ecologically complex planet, the nexus point of the emergent threat. Krellis had spent 3 full cycles of the primary orbital rotation analyzing the data streams, comparing the chaotic, often self-destructive historical patterns of the humans against the calculated, predictable expansion models of known aggressive species. The comparison yielded no satisfying congruence. The humans defied simple categorization. They possessed the technological sophistication to achieve localized stellar travel, yet their internal political structures seemed perpetually fractured, driven by highly decentralized emotional impulses that the Vithar risk matrices simply could not quantify without generating catastrophic probabilities. Subsynodic Rixia, whose function was to articulate the collective anxiety of the expansionist spheres, finally broke the silence, her voice amplified and modulated into a low, resonating thrum that challenged the passive violet light. Speaker Krellis, the monitoring sphere's reports grow more unsettling with every passing rotation. Their rate of technological assimilation is exponential, disproportionate to their observable internal stability. They are not merely expanding, they are metastasizing. We have observed localized energy signatures suggesting the near-instantaneous synthesis of novel isotopes, followed immediately by their weaponization. They are not utilizing established physics. They are inventing new physics to solve immediate, often transient, local conflicts. This volatility cannot be permitted to approach the regulated borders of the hegemony. Intervention is a necessity of preemptive quarantine, dictated by the foundational principle of galactic equilibrium. Krellis held a hand aloft, the gesture freezing the immediate atmospheric distortion caused by Rixia's amplified urgency. He allowed the silence to stretch, forcing the subsynodics to process the spatial vastness of their dilemma, the sheer philosophical leap required to assess a species that viewed stability not as an inherent goal, but often as a temporary, optional condition. We are aware of the metrics, Rixia. The models predict a 67% chance of significant disruption to bordering territories within the next 300 standard cycles, should their expansion remain unchecked. But the calculus of intervention demands a deeper understanding than mere statistical projection. We are deliberating not merely the disposal of a nascent threat, but the initiation of an engagement that, according to the observational history, may define the next 1,000 generations of the hegemony. We must consider the nature of their pursuit. Subsynodic Jaron, representing the intelligence nexus and famed for his measured caution, interjected, his voice carrying the faint metallic echo of his data conduits. Speaker, Rixia ignores the critical historical anomalies. The humans wage war against themselves with shocking brutality, true, but they also cease those conflicts with abrupt, almost total dedication to reconstruction and mutual advancement. They possess a capacity for immediate, comprehensive cooperation following profound trauma that none of our observed species share. We have witnessed cycles where they moved from planetary annihilation to joint stellar colonization efforts within the span of a single human lifespan. This is not simple volatility. It is a bizarre, compressed cycle of self-destruction and radical rebirth. If we strike them, Krellis, we risk catching them at the point of rebirth, facing not chaos but focused, unified, and exponentially dedicated opposition. Krellis nodded slowly, the movement and affirmation of Jaron's insight, yet also a dismissal of its complete sufficiency. Precisely, Jaron, we speak of the human capacity for what they term commitment, Our data streams indicate that when a human community or the species collectively perceives an existential threat, or more dangerously, a grave moral injury, they cease to calculate risk or cost. They adopt a trajectory of non-negotiable, unwavering pursuit. Their historical records are saturated with narratives where individuals, and later entire political blocs, dedicated their entire existence and pledged their descendants to the accomplishment of a single objective, often spanning multiple generations. He paused, allowing a faint, almost invisible image to coalesce near the map of Sol 3, an archaic, fragmented text rendered in the angular script of the long-vanished Zalosian inquest. I have authorized the release of archived observation data dating back 18,000 of our own stellar cycles, data gathered by the Zalosian inquest during their brief tenure near the human cradle. The Zalosians, a species that valued isolation and quiet study above all else, retreated from this sector of the galaxy entirely shortly after compiling this specific data set. They left behind a single, terse philosophical outline regarding humanity. I want the synodic nexus to absorb the core tenet of this ancient warning before we consider deploying the tactical spheres. The angular Zalosian script expanded, resolving into the universal translation within the void, bathing the chamber in a cold, deep blue that contrasted sharply with the operational violet. The text was spare, unsettlingly direct. The human species possesses a fatal flaw. They do not understand cessation. They are temporary beings obsessed with permanence. If they are assaulted without sufficient cause or their philosophical integrity is breached, they will not merely seek retribution. They will internalize the conflict as a defining aspect of their future existence. Their response is not a war, but a multi-generational devotion to a single principle, the negation of the threat. To attack them is to accept an antagonist that will dedicate its evolutionary future to your eradication, never pausing, never forgetting, never ceding the hunt until the initiating entity is extinguished. They will hunt you forever. A profound, unnatural stillness settled over the synodic nexus. The Vithar, beings whose lives were measured in multi-century lifespans, and whose strategic planning operated on temporal scales of millennia, understood the psychological terror embedded in the word forever. Their own cultural ethics dictated measured responses, negotiated settlements, and critically, defined parameters for conflict resolution and cessation. A foe that refused to accept the cessation of conflict was, by definition, an engine of existential uncertainty. Rixia, though outwardly maintaining her composure, injected a tremor of genuine psychological distress into her response. An ancient, non-aligned observation, Krellis, highly speculative. We possess technological superiority by a substantial margin. Our orbital defense platforms alone could neutralize their core systems before they unified their chaotic internal response mechanisms. And what happens when we neutralize them? Krellis challenged, his gaze fixed not on Rixia, but on the silent Zalosian text. Do they surrender? Do they integrate into the hegemony structure? No, they do what they have always done. They retreat into the shadows, into the interstitial spaces of the galaxy, and they reinvent themselves. Their history is littered with instances of technologically inferior, philosophically cornered factions returning generations later with asymmetric, devastating capabilities. The Zalosians recognize that the true danger of humanity is not their current weaponry, but their refusal to accept the permanence of defeat. They absorb the failure, and it transforms them into something more dedicated, more focused, and ultimately more lethal. Krellis leaned forward, the motion causing a ripple in the violet field. The diplomatic probes we dispatched 3 rotations ago have yielded nothing but silence. They are aware of our surveillance, yet they have made no attempt to challenge or communicate. This silence is what alarms the intelligence nexus most greatly. It suggests not ignorance, but a deliberate choice to remain uncommitted to interaction, observing us while we debate them. We stand at the precipice of initiating a 1,000-generation war based on statistical probabilities of disruption, ignoring the profound ethical anomaly they represent. We must know why they are silent, and what philosophical structure underpins their terrifying persistence. The tension solidified into a palpable metallic taste on the Vithar sensors. The synodic nexus held its breath, awaiting the outcome of the deep space surveillance operation focusing on a recently discovered human deep space outpost located far beyond their charted expansion vectors, an outpost utilizing energy signatures that defied Vithar particle physics models. It was not overtly aggressive, merely their asterisk, a beacon of inexplicable presence in the silent void. The waiting lasted 17 standard cycles. Krellis ordered the Synodic Nexus to remain convened, demanding continuous slow-motion review of human historical hollows. The devastating global conflicts, the near-miraculous scientific leaps achieved during periods of enforced cooperation, the terrifying, absolute dedication of individuals to causes that seemed meaningless to the highly pragmatic Vithar mind, concepts like justice, freedom, and moral vindication. On the 18th cycle, the silence was shattered, not by an aggressive volley, but by a structured, highly sophisticated communication burst originating directly from the mysterious human outpost. It was not coded for encryption, but for universal reception, utilizing a complex, mathematically elegant universal language matrix that the Vithar had considered theoretical, reserved only for communication with truly ancient entities. The Nexus projected the incoming feed, resolving the signal into a single static image, a human female, centered in a stark, ethically neutral environment. Her features were composed, displaying no overt emotion, yet carrying an immense, almost burdensome gravitas. She was identified simply as Ambassador Selene Vance. Vance began speaking immediately, her voice translated into the Vithar's preferred, resonating frequency, calm, precise, devoid of any attempt at rhetorical flair or intimidation. To the leadership structure of the Vithar hegemony, represented by the Synodic Nexus, we acknowledge your presence. We acknowledge your sustained surveillance. We acknowledge the calculated risk assessment that has preceded this moment of contact. We have been monitoring your approach and your internal deliberations for the past 523 human days. The revelation that the humans had penetrated the secure internal communication streams of the hegemony and knew the duration of their debate caused a noticeable shift in the composure of the Synodic members. Vance continued, her tone remaining completely placid, as though reciting a technical specification. During the surveillance period, your monitoring vessel, designation *Ethel 7, encountered an orbital kinetic barrier maintained by our defense infrastructure on the fringe of the Persephone system. The vessel was disabled by the energy discharge, a non-lethal, preventative measure intended solely to halt unauthorized physical ingress into a restricted research zone. We understand this event may have been interpreted by your internal metrics as an act of hostility. Krellis felt a cold realization settle. The humans were not just analyzing their ships. They had let them approach, knowing the limits of their own non-lethal defense system, turning the incident into a controlled experiment. The Ethel 7 has been stabilized and is being returned to your projected rendezvous coordinates, Vance stated. The crew is unharmed, rested, and treated for minor psychological stress resulting from system failure. Accompanying the vessel are 2 extensive documents, which we urge the Synodic Nexus to review with extreme prejudice. The first document is a comprehensive technical analysis of the Ethel 7*S propulsion architecture and sensor array. Our engineers isolated the flaws that permitted the vessel to remain detectable by tertiary harmonics, correcting the foundational mathematical error in your current velocity damping field equation. We have supplied the corrected schematics and the optimized solution for implementation across your exploratory fleet. This is offered as an act of good faith and demonstration of our capacity for non-aggressive, beneficial exchange. Geron leaned forward, his data conduits flickering wildly, correcting a foundational error in Vithar primary propulsion. The technology they had labored over for 5 centuries was an unheard-of claim. If true, it indicated not merely parity, but a profound and terrifying leap in theoretical physics capability hidden beneath the chaotic surface of their species. The second document, Vance continued, maintaining her unblinking gaze, is a diplomatic manifesto. It outlines the absolute, immutable conditions for coexistence with the species known as humanity. I summarize its core principle now for the benefit of immediate strategic planning. Humanity exists within a framework of absolute self-determination. We do not require, nor will we accept, external governance, structural modification, or forced integration into any pre-existing galactic order. Furthermore, the document addresses the concept of preemptive aggression. If the hegemony, or any aligned entity, chooses to deploy offensive force against any sovereign human asset, physical or philosophical, the response will not be measured, negotiated, or limited by conventional metrics of conflict. Solution. We understand that your risk models quantify conflict based on acceptable loss and inevitable cessation. We reject this premise. The atmosphere in the Nexus grew frigid, the violet light struggling against the cold intensity of Vance's projected image. If you strike us, we will not simply defend ourselves, nor will we seek mere retribution. We will dedicate every resource, every future generation, every scientific endeavor, and every aspect of our unified existence to the singular, unwavering goal of negating the source of the initial threat. This is not a threat of warfare. It is a declaration of commitment. We do not negotiate with fundamental threats to our existence. We eradicate them. We will hunt the instigator until its systems fail, its culture fractures, and its memory is erased from the historical record, regardless of the time required. We do this not from malice, but from a profound, stable, and evolutionary requirement for species survival. We are a species that requires space and autonomy to heal our own historical scars. Any entity that threatens that process will be treated as an absolute biological imperative to destroy. Vance paused, the silence now deafening, imbued with the weight of her calm, terrible honesty. The hegemony is now aware of the true cost of intervention. We seek only peaceful coexistence and mutual advancement. We urge you to consider the data, analyze the technical exchange, and calculate the true, long-term cost of awakening an adversary that accepts nothing less than the permanent conclusion. The image dissolved. The synodic nexus was left suspended in the aftermath, the data conduit screaming with the unexpected influx of the detailed schematics for the Ethel 7*S corrected propulsion system. Krellis ordered an immediate, maximum priority investigation into the veracity of the human technical data. The synodic nexus broke its formal session, splitting into hyper-focused technical, historical, and strategic sub-councils. The core philosophical debate was momentarily eclipsed by the astonishing implications of the returned vessel and its corrected blueprints. Jaron, flanked by the lead hegemony physicists, returned 2 standard cycles later. His usual intellectual detachment was shattered, replaced by a profound clinical shock. "Speaker Krellis," Jaron began, his voice barely audible even with amplification. "The human data is not a fabrication. The technical analysis of the Ethel 7 is flawless. Furthermore, the corrected damping field equation they provided resolves 3 major theoretical conflicts in our own pre-existing quantum entanglement propulsion models. We had estimated a required research period of approximately 60 Vthar generations to achieve this breakthrough. They achieved it in the time it took to observe our malfunctioning vessel and write the report." A tremor ran through the remaining members of the council. 60 generations of fundamental research solved in a matter of days. "But why?" Rixia demanded, her voice edged with genuine fear now, not political aggression. "Why give us this? If they possess this level of asymmetry, why expose their capabilities in a non-threatening manner? Why not use it as leverage or hide it entirely?" "That is the essential puzzle," Krellis mused, tracing the outline of the Zalosian text that still faintly glowed in the periphery. "They are demonstrating their power not through threats of annihilation, but through the calm, undeniable revelation of intellectual superiority, linked explicitly to an ethical offering. They are telling us, we see your flaws, we could exploit them, but we choose to correct them, providing you choose peace." Jaron confirmed Krellis's assessment. The accompanying analysis provided a cultural rationale for the gift. The humans labeled it diplomacy of unassailable competence. They stated that a stable hegemony, advancing at maximum capacity, is inherently less likely to panic and strike out at perceived threats. By stabilizing our core technology, they are, in their minds, stabilizing galactic order, removing the potential for our desperate aggression. "They are leveraging their absolute competence to enforce peace," Krellis concluded, a new, heavy respect entering his segmented eyes. "They are demonstrating that they are not chaotic, but possess a terrifying, profound stability, a stability rooted not in rigid structure like our own, but in an absolute moral commitment to their own survival, which requires the competence to manage potential aggressors." The synodic nexus spent the next rotation dissecting the second document, the diplomatic manifesto. It was not a document of demands, but of declarations. It described the human concept of moral territory, asserting that any aggression, even a simple, controlled military incursion, constituted an existential breach, triggering the forever hunt response. The document detailed with unnerving precision historical instances where humanity dedicated vast resources to pursuits that had no immediate benefit, only long-term existential vindication, such as hunting down historical war criminals decades after the conflict had ended, or dedicating planetary resources to preserving obscure data fragments simply because they represented a cultural moral debt. Rixia, the former champion of intervention, now spoke with a tremor of profound understanding. Speaker, their threat is not technological, it is psychological and temporal. We view conflict as a means to achieve a territorial or resource objective, followed by a treaty. They view existential conflict as a state of being, a defining cultural mandate that supersedes all other goals. If we attack them, we are not facing a fleet. We are facing a cultural dedication to vengeance that will outlive our own governing structures. The warning was accurate, Krellis murmured, gazing at the vacant space where Ambassador Vance's image had been. Do not attack them because they will hunt you forever. They are not ruled by short-term gain or emotional volatility, as we assumed. They are ruled by profound, long-term philosophical commitment. Krellis issued the order. The deployment spheres were halted. The border surveillance was adjusted to passive monitoring only. A formal, reciprocal diplomatic contact was initiated, accepting the terms of the Human Manifesto and inviting Ambassador Vance to the Synodic Nexus for direct, embodied consultation. The arrival of the human diplomatic cruiser, the Asterisk Arbiter of Sol Asterisk, into the regulated approach lanes of the hegemony capital system was an event of silent, profound tension. It was escorted not by the hegemony's largest combat vessels, but by the entire fleet of unarmed, deep space scientific and diplomatic observers, a silent, physical display of Krellis's commitment to non-aggression. Ambassador Vance, now physically present within the reception area adjoining the Synodic Nexus, was smaller than her projected image suggested, yet her presence seemed to compress the voluminous space around her. She was accompanied by a minimal security detail and one other individual, a figure identified only as Logistics Coordinator Chen. Krellis met her in a neutral space designed for pre-conference acclimatization, a room floored with shifting sands that mirrored the eternal, quiet flux of nebulae, intended to instill a sense of the temporal insignificance of immediate conflicts. Vance did not offer the elaborate ritual greetings expected by the hegemony. She approached with direct, measured steps and acknowledged Krellis with a slight inclination of her head. Speaker Krellis, I appreciate the swift and definitive nature of your response to our communication. Your willingness to accept the terms of the manifesto indicates a recognition of the required stability for mutual coexistence. Krellis, standing taller than Vance, felt the strange compulsion to articulate the gravity of the shift. Ambassador Vance, your species has fundamentally challenged the strategic paradigms of the hegemony. Your capacity for technological secrecy, combined with your absolute moral clarity regarding self-preservation, forced a reassessment of our entire system of risk calculus. We mistook ethical conviction for chaotic weakness. It is a common error among species that prioritize external systemic stability over internal ethical consistency, Vance responded calmly. Humanity is complex, often violent, but our species-level commitments, when galvanized by external threat, are rigid. We do not forget. We do not forgive existential assaults. We endure the trauma, and then we utilize the resulting focus to negate the source of that trauma. We call it strategic persistence. It is the ethical engine that powers our technological advancement. Krellis paused, gesturing towards the complex, mesmerizing pattern of the shifting sands. We accepted your terms, Ambassador. We accept that an attack upon humanity initiates a war without end. Now we must ask, what is required to build trust? Not merely deterrence, but genuine, functional partnership? Vance looked at the shifting sands, but her gaze seemed fixed on a point far beyond the chamber walls. Trust is built on shared vulnerability, Speaker Krellis. We have demonstrated our technological superiority, or rather, our profound difference in scientific approach, to preempt your aggression. Now we must demonstrate that the stability we seek is not merely for ourselves, but for the quadrant. Humanity requires absolute non-interference to heal from its own long history of self-inflicted wounds. We are attempting to build a civilization that transcends the cycle of conflict and rebirth, but that transition requires focus. Any distraction, internal or external, that threatens the species' cohesion is intolerable. Coordinator Chen, who had remained silent until this moment, stepped slightly forward. Chen was older. Then Vance, his face etched with the lines of deep personal contemplation. Speaker, we understand the Vthar perception of chaotic risk. We know you have struggled to categorize us. Permit us to provide context that cannot be found in our public historical archives. Chen activated a small, unobtrusive device. The shifting sand floor momentarily resolved into a single, breathtaking image. a vast, geometrically impossible crystalline structure floating in the void, utterly silent, radiating an ancient, incomprehensible energy signature. It was colossal, dwarfing any known hegemony or human superstructure. "This is a partial map of a network we call the Void Scars," Chen explained, his voice low and solemn. "They are the remnants of a civilization that preceded both of ours by uncountable epochs. They mastered everything: energy, matter, time, and space. They achieved a form of galactic hegemony so profound that their disappearance was a silence of cosmic proportions. For the last 200 human years, we have devoted significant classified resources not to offensive expansion, but to decoding the residual data from these structures." Vance stepped in to elaborate. "We learned two things, Speaker. First, that complexity does not equate to survival. The Void Scars collapsed not due to external conflict, but due to internal philosophical stagnation, the inability to innovate beyond their own perfection. Second, and crucially, we discovered a consistent data anomaly in the residual gravitational wake of every major scar fragment. The crystalline image of the scar was replaced by a complex, rapidly oscillating waveform, a pattern that defied interpretation by standard VTHAR energy physics. "This is a persistent energy waveform," Vance stated. "It is not biological, nor is it based on the manipulation of fundamental matter. Our analysis indicates it is a non-baryonic signature, utilizing dimensions of reality that we only marginally comprehend. We refer to this pattern internally as the Great Silencer. It is not an enemy that seeks resources or territory. It is an entity that seeks only to reduce complexity, to enforce total, non-negotiable quiescence across the sector." Krellis felt a true, cold fear, not the bureaucratic, political fear of humanity, but the primal fear of the unknown scale of the cosmos. "A cosmic threat? Why have our deep space monitors not detected this entity?" "Because it operates in cycles of deep temporal compression," Chen replied. "It does not move at speed, it moves through the structure of time itself. The human deep space outpost that disabled your Ethel 7 was not a military base. It was a highly sensitive temporal anomaly detector. The incursion was not hostile. It was a desperate attempt to gather data on a predictive spike in the silencer's localized signature." Vance met Krellis's gaze directly. "We brought you the technical correction to stabilize your fleet not merely as a diplomatic gesture, but because the coming threat operates on a scale where individualistic, competing species will simply be erased. We needed you stable, powerful, and focused on existential threat, not petty conflict. We withheld this information until we were absolutely certain the hegemony had committed to non-aggression, because a panicked, uncommitted alliance against the silencer would be a liability. The truth, Speaker," Chen concluded gravely, "is that humanity has been preparing for an apocalypse that neither of our species caused. The forever hunt we declared upon any aggressor is not merely vengeance. It is a profound species-level survival mechanism designed to eliminate internal distraction and enforce the singular focus required to survive the cycle of the Great Silencer." The revelation fundamentally altered the trajectory of the synodic nexus. The political calculations of Rixia and the cautious strategies of Geron became instantly obsolete, replaced by a unifying terror and the desperate need for actionable intelligence. The perceived threat of humanity, their chaotic expansion, their unpredictable technology, was revealed to be a highly controlled, deeply ethical preparation for a threat that dwarfed galactic civilization itself. Krellis convened the synodic nexus again, but this time, Ambassador Vance and Coordinator Chen were placed at the center, not as petitioners or adversaries, but as the providers of critical, life-altering knowledge. The violet light of the chamber now seemed too soft, too complacent for the magnitude of the coming darkness. "The humans have provided us with a stark choice," Krellis announced to the assembled synodic members. "We can continue to debate relative power scales, or we can unify to face the inevitable. The data provided by Coordinator Chen regarding the Void Scars is being verified by our most specialized quantum analysts, and the early confirmations are terrifying. The silencer is not a distant, theoretical threat. It's localized. Nature is predicted to breach the visible spectrum within 50 human years." Vance addressed the entire chamber, her voice clear and precise. "The challenge is not one of firepower, but of conceptual agility. The silencer operates by manipulating the ambient cosmic entropy, accelerating localized decay, effectively silencing entire swathes of space by stripping them of the energy required to sustain complex organization. Standard weaponry will be neutralized by the rapid entropic shift it generates. We need a unified defense architecture based on temporal stabilization and the manipulation of non-baryonic energy fields. Fields we have, frankly, only just begun to fully comprehend. The ensuing deliberation lasted for 7 full rotations, shifting from fear to intellectual desperation, and finally settling into a grim, focused determination. The Vithar hegemony, structured for measured generational planning, was forced to integrate the breakneck pace of human innovation and their willingness to bet massive resources on theoretical science. Geron, after absorbing the complex temporal field mathematics provided by Chen, spoke with newfound urgency. Ambassador Vance, the technical solutions you propose require the complete dismantling and retooling of our primary industrial sectors. It requires an alliance not merely of shared information, but of integrated manufacturing and research, a merging of our strategic focus that the hegemony has never contemplated, even with its closest allies. Vance nodded. We understand the sacrifice of autonomy this entails, but the alternative is total erasure. Humanity offers this, a unified R&D matrix co-managed by the best minds of both our species. We will share the entirety of our knowledge regarding the void scars and the Great Silencer. In exchange, we require absolute, documented non-interference and the full commitment of the hegemony's vast resource network and stable infrastructure to the immediate construction of the unified temporal defense grid. Rixia, humbled by the sheer scale of the cosmic threat, sought clarification on the cultural implications. Your manifesto, Ambassador, spoke of the forever hunt. If we accept this alliance and we face the Silencer, what is the nature of your species' commitment to the hegemony? If we fail, or if we betray the alliance, do you then turn your terrifying persistence upon us? Vance looked at Rixia with an expression Krellis recognized as profound, ethical seriousness, the absence of negotiation. If the hegemony were to betray the alliance now, knowing the scope of the Silencer, such an act would constitute an ethical breach of cosmic proportions, a self-inflicted wound to the nascent galactic cooperation. Yes, Speaker Rixia, if you attack us or betray the established alliance parameters now, the consequence remains the same, but the hunt would be fueled by the added gravity of shared knowledge and responsibility. However, Vance continued, shifting her weight slightly, if the hegemony upholds the alliance, our commitment shifts. The human capacity for dedication is not restricted to vengeance. It is a commitment to the objective. If we fight the Silencer together, our persistence, the forever hunt, is directed at the enemy of all life. It becomes a dedication to galactic preservation, a commitment to ensuring that the hegemony and humanity and all potential future civilizations survive this cosmic erasure cycle. The depth of our commitment is not dependent on hostility. It is dependent on the target of our shared moral focus. Krellis finally rose, the movement slow and deliberate, signifying the end of the debate and the irreversible commitment of his civilization. Ambassador Vance, Coordinator Chen. The hegemony accepts the terms of the Unified Defense Mandate. We will dismantle the old structures and integrate our capacities as required. We choose the shared hunt for survival over the calculated risk of preemptive conflict. The formal agreement was codified in a ceremony marked not by celebratory fanfares, but by the quiet, dedicated humming of massive data streams transferring millennia of hegemony structural knowledge and centuries of human asymmetric scientific data. Weeks folded into months. The integration process was jarring. The Vithar, accustomed to methodical, slow-paced planning, were frequently overwhelmed by the human capacity for immediate, high-intensity shifts in focus. Vithar engineering teams struggled to keep pace with the iterative human process, the constant, sometimes frantic, cycle of design, failure, total reassessment, and rapid redeployment. Yet the core Vithar strength, their vast, stable resource network, their mastery of large-scale construction, and their unflinching dedication to task completion, proved indispensable to the humans. The temporal stabilization devices, derived from the human theoretical models, were manufactured across hegemony worlds with unimaginable speed and precision. Krellis found himself spending hours in conference with Vance and Chen, no longer debating survival, but planning the structure of the next 100 generations, the post-Silencer era. He learned that the humans' terrifying resilience was not just a reaction to war, but a deep-seated cultural imperative driven by an agonizing self-awareness of their own fleeting lives and their unique capacity to feel profound, species-defining collective guilt over past mistakes. One rotation, Krellis sought Chen in the central data nexus, which now pulsed with the combined violet and white light of the two great civilizations. Coordinator Chen, Krellis asked, watching the complex three-dimensional modeling of the temporal defense grid unfold across the massive display. You spoke of the void scars achieving perfection and stagnating. Humanity, though chaotic, seems to avoid this stagnation through constant, painful self-assessment. Is this chaos your true defense against the silencer? Chen paused, his hand resting on a panel that monitored the energy input into the nascent defense architecture. Chaos is the symptom speaker, not the defense. The defense is the willingness to abandon cherished structures the moment they cease to function. The void scars became so efficient, so structurally perfect, that they lost the capacity for internal disagreement, for unexpected error, for the random, necessary mutation of thought that drives innovation. When the silencer approached them, they applied the perfect, known solution to the problem, and when it failed, they had no capacity to invent a completely new, flawed, but ultimately successful solution. Humanity operates on the philosophy that failure is merely an expensive data point, Chen continued, turning to face Krellis. We embrace the risk of failure, even self-destruction, because we know that survival demands the capacity to be utterly wrong today, so we can be unexpectedly right tomorrow. Our history, filled with violence and rapid recovery, taught us that. Our capacity for the forever hunt is merely the focus generated when that knowledge is applied to a collective external threat. 50 standard human years passed in a blur of integrated effort. The hegemony's stable populations and industrial might were mobilized entirely towards the unified defense mandate. The temporal stabilization grid was nearing completion, wrapping a protective membrane around the core worlds of both civilizations. Krellis, now older and deeply marked by the gravity of the shared enterprise, stood with Vance on the observation platform of the primary temporal stabilizer array, a construct so vast it utilized a small moon as its anchor. The deep space sensors, now unified and running human-derived algorithms, screamed a warning that was no longer a prediction, but an imminent reality. The great silencer was breaching the visible spectrum. On the main tactical display, a region of the galactic void began to shift. Stars did not disappear. They simply began to lose their energetic signature, fading not into darkness, but into a sterile, cold grayness, a vacuum stripped of all fundamental kinetic energy. The silence was absolute. "It is here," Vance stated, her voice quiet, almost reverent. "The ultimate entropy engine. It has arrived precisely at the coordinates predicted by the scar fragments. Our defense grid is at 87% operational capacity. We must activate it now." Krellis nodded, his final political anxieties dissolved by the sheer scale of the looming threat. He gave the final authorization codes. The temporal defense grid roared to life, not with sound, but with an immense, silent surge of non-baryonic energy, bathing the combined stellar systems in a shimmering, deep blue field, the color of the ancient Zalosian warning. It was a barrier against temporal decay, a shield against the acceleration of cosmic silence. The initial impact was devastating. The silencer's entropic field collided with the temporal grid. For a moment, the vast, moon-sized stabilizer array flickered, and a wave of pure, cold stillness washed over the control center, extinguishing every light source not protected by redundant, immediate, human-designed kinetic batteries. The control room plunged into a humming emergency red. "Initial breach attempt neutralized," Vance reported, monitoring the massive energy drain on the grid. "The structure holds Krellis, but this is merely the probe. The main entity is assembling its field signature now. The force amplification will be beyond the projected limit." Just as the crisis reached its peak, Chen, monitoring the deep void residual scar data, shouted into the command link, his voice ragged with disbelief. "Wait, Ambassador Speaker Krellis. The silencer is not merely seeking to eradicate us. It is reacting to the grid's energy signature. It is stabilizing its own field in a specific mathematical sequence. This is not arbiter. RE destruction. It is asterisk communicating." The immense, sterile grayness in the void suddenly coalesced, forming a geometrically impossible structure opposite the temporal grid, a mirror image of the scars, but active, immense, and terrifyingly cold. Vance and Krellis stared at the display. The structure was undeniably artificial. It was responding to their complex defense energy with a response that was itself a complex energy pattern. "It is not the silencer," Vance whispered, her composure momentarily broken by the shock of the cosmic paradigm shift. "It is the asterisk response to the scars. It is a defense system, ancient and automated, reacting to the residual energy left behind by the collapsing civilization." Chen quickly overlaid the ancient Zalosian inquest data onto the emerging energy pattern. "The Zalosians were wrong. The scars did not collapse from stagnation alone." They were destroyed by their own automated safety system. They created a mechanism to enforce quietude, to halt internal entropy, and when they became too complex, too energy-dense, the system activated to silence the excess complexity. The true threat was not an external cosmic horror, but an automated, millennia-old defense protocol gone rogue. A mechanism designed to prevent the scars from destabilizing the entire sector with their overwhelming perfection. Krellis felt a dizzying wave of philosophical realization. The entire crisis, the hegemony's fear, the human manifesto, the terrifying dedication to the forever hunt had been predicated on a mistaken identity of the adversary. Vance recovered quickly, her strategic focus instantly snapping back into place. If it is automated, it must have a failure mode, an access point. We must find the core command protocol. Chen was already feverishly working through the residual scar data. The scars left behind one final, hidden message, not about the silencer, but about themselves. A failsafe, recorded in a pattern of entangled particles that required a massive, continuous, non-baryonic energy input to stabilize and decrypt. The temporal defense grid, Krellis realized, the sheer audacity of the cosmic irony washing over him. The structure we built to fight the threat is providing the exact power source needed to access the threat's control key. Vance wasted no time on existential reflection. Krellis, divert 80% of the grid's power. All stabilization protocols must be temporarily suspended into Chen's decryption sequence. If this mechanism activates, we are exposed entirely to the automated entity, but it is our only chance to shut it down. We need the human capacity for radical, instantaneous risk assessment now. Krellis did not hesitate. The memory of the Zalosian warning, the understanding that the humans were stable in their commitment, had prepared him for this moment of absolute species-level risk. Execute the power transfer. The hegemony commits its infrastructure to the human solution. The energy drain on the temporal grid was catastrophic. The blue field surrounding the combined systems collapsed entirely, leaving the core worlds exposed to the deep, unnatural chill of the automated entropy field. Alarms blared throughout the control center, but Krellis and Vance stood motionless, focused entirely on Chen's efforts. The automated entity, the great silencer, reacted instantly to the power shift, recognizing the disruption as a primary threat to its ancient mandate of quietude. It surged forward, its entropic field accelerating, threatening to strip the combined fleet of all operational energy within moments. Chen's monitors, however, glowed with sudden, brilliant complexity. The failsafe message from the void scars had materialized. It was not a technical command, but a warning rendered in a universal philosophical language. Chen translated the message rapidly, his voice choked with emotion. It reads, "The greatest danger is the refusal to accept the beautiful flaw. We sought perfect, eternal stasis, and our guardian became our executioner. To silence the guardian, one must introduce the element it was designed to negate, unnecessary complexity. Inject the random, the emotional, the fundamentally illogical into the core structure." Vance understood immediately, her eyes widening with comprehension. The silencer is based purely on algorithmic logic, the pursuit of absolute stasis. It can only be broken by human chaos, not military chaos, but our capacity for profound, immediate, irrational, emotional input. She looked at Krellis, a new, terrible plan forming in her gaze. "Speaker, we need a massive, highly specific emotional data transfer injected into the heart of the automated entity, a signal that is mathematically true, yet philosophically irrelevant to the goal of survival. We need to overload its logic processors with a core human concept that cannot be quantified or neutralized by entropic means." "What concept?" Krellis demanded, watching the automat. Ed entity close to within moments of effective range. "Grief," Vance said, her voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "The memory of a collective, species-defining grief. We will not transmit a threat. We will transmit a record of our capacity for profound, dedicated sorrow over loss. That is the ultimate non-negotiable core of human persistence, the memory of what we fight to protect." She turned to Coordinator Chen. "Chen, access the Cradle Archive, the complete emotional historical record of the great human losses. Inject the full spectrum of our species' collective grief, sorrow, and unquantifiable dedication to remembrance, amplified through the remaining grid stabilizers, directly into the core matrix of the automated entity. Overload its logical capacity with pure, unprocessable emotional persistence." Chen, recognizing the insane, desperate genius of the plan, began the upload immediately. Transfer was immense, utilizing protocols of emotional communication the Vithar had previously dismissed as highly inefficient. The core of the silencer, the ancient, vast automated defense mechanism, was suddenly barraged by the concentrated, eternal weight of human sorrow. The memory of planetary conflicts, the quiet dedication to fallen loved ones, the deep, species-level commitment to carrying the scars of history forward. The Vithar, watching the reaction on their monitors, saw the impossible. The geometric perfection of the automated structure hesitated. Its massive energy signature flickered and stalled, struggling to categorize the non-entropic input. It was receiving data that mathematically mandated no action, yet emotionally demanded perpetual, unending focus. The logic gate jammed. For a terrifying, protracted moment, the automated entity simply stopped. And then, a tremor ran through its massive structure, an internal feedback loop caused by the injection of unquantifiable, persistent sorrow. The great silencer did not explode. It imploded, collapsing in on itself not with fire or destruction, but with the quiet, final silence of a logical system that had exhausted all possible calculations and failed to categorize the emotional persistence of the emergent species. It was defeated by the very element the void scars had sought to eliminate: unnecessary complexity. The aftermath was a silence of relief, profound and absolute. The combined fleets drifted in the space where the cosmic threat had been, bathed once more in the operational violet light of the narrow-forming temporal defense grid. Krellis stood with Vance, looking out at the void. The combined efforts of the two civilizations had not merely averted disaster, they had fundamentally altered their shared perception of reality. "Ambassador Vance," Krellis said, the official formality finally stripped away, replaced by a deep, weary respect. "Your species defeated an ancient, autonomous entity not with superior firepower, but with dedicated grief. You utilized your capacity for hunting forever, not for vengeance, but for the preservation of an unquantifiable moral principle, remembrance." Vance acknowledged the statement with a quiet nod. "The forever hunt is merely the name we give to our refusal to let anything extinguish our focus. We needed that focus to survive our own history, and we needed it to navigate the true cosmos. We cannot forget our pain, Speaker. That memory is the energy source for our persistence." The alliance, forged in fear and sealed by shared vulnerability, was now absolute. The hegemony realized that humanity was not a chaotic threat, but the most ethically consistent, deeply dedicated partner they could have ever hoped to find. A partner whose greatest strength lay in its profound, stable commitment to a future defined by remembrance and cautious, rapid innovation. Krellis looked at the stars, now shining with a clarity that belied the recent cosmic horror. "We are bound now, Ambassador, by a secret that spans generations. We have survived the Great Silencer. The immediate crisis is averted. What is the next focus of the unified endeavor?" Vance smiled, a rare, small expression that carried the weight of galactic discovery. Coordinator Chen stepped forward, projecting a faint, new image into the void. Not the void scars, but a single, ancient, faint pattern of organized stellar light located far beyond the established boundaries of both civilizations. "During the decryption of the scars' failsafe message," Chen explained, "we found residual navigation data. The scars did not merely fear the silencer. They were attempting to flee something else, something further out, something that drove a civilization of absolute perfection to internal collapse and flight." The projected image slowly resolved into a faint, enormous organized structure of stellar mass objects, a construction of terrifying, systematic intent. "We have identified the true, ancient threat the scars were fleeing," Vance concluded, her voice low-why. The anticipation of the next great endeavor. A network of stellar manipulators constructed to harness the energy of entire galaxies, operating under a principle we can barely comprehend, the total calculated optimization of reality. We call it the unburdened architects. They are efficient, non-emotional, and possess technology that dwarfs even the scars. They are the true frontier. Krellis felt the thrill of an eternal commitment settle deep in his core, the awareness that the forever hunt had only just begun. The hegemony, partnered with the most persistent, dedicated species in the known cosmos, now faced a challenge that would truly define their combined destiny. "They seek efficiency and optimization," Krellis mused, his gaze steady on the vast, silent stellar construct. "We will introduce them to the profound, persistent inefficiency of dedicated human persistence. We have a universe to stabilize, Ambassador Vance, and now we have the means to hunt the next horizon together forever." The combined light of the Vithar and human vessels began to turn outwards, away from the healed scar in the local cluster, towards the immense new frontier united not by dominance, but by the shared, heavy wisdom of survival and the ethics of persistence. The silence of the void was broken only by the steady, unifying hum of their integrated, advancing fleet.